Grammer here of Moonlight Monster Media. And when I'm not jamming on my guitar or writing books like Dirt Road Tales of Horror, I'm listening to none other than the No Holds Barred, Satisfaction Guaranteed, No Money Down, Let's Find Out with Diego. So good, you may even get visited by little gray aliens.
Are you curious about the unknown, the unexplainable? Do you find yourself intrigued by the mysterious and paranormal side of our world? Join us on an adventure into the world of inexplicable discoveries and investigations that may someday give us the final answer as to what may be behind the veil of reality. The borders of space and time have opened once again, and transmitting from the mountains of West Virginia, it's time once again for Let's Find Out with Diego. The universe is waiting for you.
The borders of space and time have opened once again, and transmitting from the mountains of West Virginia. It's another episode of Let's Find Out with Diego. Thank you for taking this journey with me. On this episode of Let's Find Out, our guest is a dedicated researcher and podcaster with a lifetime of first-hand experiences in paranormal events. His intricate journey was sparked by the mysterious and unexplained encounters that he endured, leading him down a path of exploration into topics such as cryptids, UFOs, monsters, and other phenomena. His commitment to open-minded investigation and thorough research sets him apart in his field. All this plus more. Please welcome to Let's Find Out, researcher, investigator, and host of Inquiries of Our Reality, Shayn Jones. Shayn, my friend, welcome to Let's Find Out. I feel like I've completely and severely undersold all your talents, my friend.
Dude, I was going to say that was a great intro. That's one of the best I've ever gotten. I don't usually guest on shows too often. So, I mean, I thought that was a great intro.
No, man, I was reading over your bio and I started off, I met you last year at Cryptid Halloween #2 back in, in Charlestown over at the VFW, something like that, or the American Legion. I'm sorry, Snarly.
American Legion.
Yeah. And you guys did a great job with presenting. You had a great presentation there with different type of things with cryptids in your area and around the country as well, right?
Oh yeah. We did Snarly Yow last year because, of course, we want to give a shout out to Dave Snarly Yow, and then we ended up covering some more of the dog lore. We covered Wendigos and stuff like that. We kind of had this continuous presentation that all kind of started with Snarly Yow and diving into other dog-like cryptids in the West Virginia area.
Yeah, and there's plenty of them too, because I have a poster right next to me. It kind of helps me give me a reminder of all the cryptids that's been not only throughout history of the state, but it's also been reported lately as well. And we're going to get into some of that because you're way up there, my friend.
Yeah, I'm up in Michigan near the Detroit area.
I interviewed a gentleman from that area. I'm not sure if it's close to your city or not. I mean, Michigan's a huge state. Talking about a lot of Bigfoot encounters been happening in Michigan. But before we get into that, my friend, I know every story has a beginning. Every journey starts somewhere. Long before you started podcasting, you actually had some experiences yourself. So if we can go back to that time, what age were you when this first started?
Honestly, I don't remember the exact age that it started at. Essentially, what my experiences started with is that I would astral project without being aware of what I was doing at the time. And it wasn't until I was way older and started digging into this stuff that I figured it out. But I would basically go to sleep at night and I would end up waking back up. But then I would either see myself sleeping in the room, or sometimes I went to other people's houses and stuff, different locations that were places I've already been before. Nothing too crazy off into any kind of woo-woo land. I mean, I did have one experience a little bit later on that I can get into that was in this weird nebula place in space, but I'll save that story for a little bit more into this. But basically what would happen with these experiences is that it almost feel like something was testing me. It would be watching me and almost trying to see what I would do while I was on this other side. And when I was a kid, it kind of started off a little bit more benevolent, where there wasn't anything that seemed scary. It was just kind of I felt like there was just something that was kind of watching me while I was doing this kind of stuff. But when I got to be a little bit older, it seemed like it started kind of getting a little bit more dark, which is when like sleep paralysis started coming in a little bit more. And I mean, of course, during all these experiences, I'd always be able to differentiate it from actually sleeping and dreaming to going to these astral realms by when I would get sleep paralysis, because I would know that I was just dreaming if I wouldn't receive that after. But when I started getting a little bit older, like I said, it started getting a little bit more dark, where when I'd come back and I'd be in this sleep paralysis state, I'd see like shadow people more often than not. And there was always this one that always stuck out more than the other ones, that was always a way bigger than the other ones. And it had these glowing green eyes. And again, they always just kind of like watched over me to see what I would do, what it felt like. I never had that like that old hag experience where something sat on my chest or anything like that. It was just being stuck in the room and watching all of these dark figures, like watching and moving around me and stuff. But moving into like when I was a teenager and stuff, like one of the most weird experiences I had was there's one day I'd fallen asleep in the middle of the floor and woke up. And when I did, I saw myself sleeping in the middle of the floor. But when I looked down at my arms and my hands and stuff, they were all completely black. Like, I wouldn't say that they looked like I was maybe another creature or anything like that, but it was all like completely blacked out, which is when I started kind of questioning stuff a little bit more, as far as like, maybe some of these shadow people that we see might actually be other people in the astral realm. And depending on like what the intentions are or what means of you getting in there possibly might be how you're presented on that other side. And when you're actually physically in that, you're seeing it 3-dimensionally, which is why I looked down and my arms were completely black and everything. But when you're viewing other people in this state, then they just show up as that black figure outline where it's not 3-dimensional, but it's just this dark clouded object. But kind of moving into these experiences more, there was another one that was pretty prolific when I remember when I was around a teenager too, where I had gone into this place and it seemed like it was almost like an obstacle course. It was all like made out of wood. It was built up on these giant rocks, and there was all this rushing water down below it. And I had to try to make it through this obstacle course. And when I got about halfway through it, I slipped and I fell into the water, and these rapids started rushing through, and I smacked a rock, woke up, had sleep paralysis. And kind of sharing some of these experiences as I started doing the show and everything. I started talking to like Vicky Joy Anderson. And for anybody that's not familiar with her, she's a Christian-based researcher who digs really, really heavy into like the sleep paralysis phenomenon. And she's found these common thread connections, it seems, between lifelong experiencers of sleep paralysis. And one of them seems to be that there's this water thing that seems to always be kind of lingering around, that a lot of these experiences seem to be based in these places where there's like water present. And she brought up the fact that I wasn't the only person who's been through these obstacle courses, specifically ones that are above water. She's talked to a bunch of people who have had these experiences, herself included. So kind of diving into it, I mean, the reason why for these obstacle courses is completely anybody's guess, but the idea that I got it, like I said, originally from them, like feeling like they were watching me to see what I would do, is it almost seemed like they were like testing me to see what I'd be able to do. And the weird part about that is that as I started getting older, I stopped remembering any of my dreams or any of these like astral travel experiences for the most part. Like I wouldn't really dream anymore. And I'd still get like the sleep paralysis. So it was like, I knew I was going somewhere else, but I don't necessarily know what's going on that other side anymore. Of course, I do still sometimes have these experiences where they're like extremely vivid dreams. One of them is I've had a few of them actually that are almost like these like post-apocalyptic type experiences where like, you know, there's like things falling from the sky, there's like creatures attacking, and, you know, I'm just like trying to survive. I'm like, you know, running through into these stores, trying to collect supplies, do all of this kind of stuff. But it seems like that seems to be a common theme with a lot of these dreams. And again, talking to Vicky Joy, she kind of mentioned the same thing. And I'm referring to them as dreams, but I don't necessarily know that for sure, because it could have been something happening in another place, because I did receive sleep paralysis after having these experiences. But another one of the like the more vivid ones was this experience where the best way to describe it is I felt like I was dimension hopping, where I went to sleep that night and I woke up and I was in another place, and I tried to find my girlfriend. And when I finally found her, she was her, but she wasn't like quite her. She was like a different variation or a different version of her. So I went to sleep and the same thing kept happening. And I felt like I was in this experience for probably a good like 6 months. And when I came back to this reality, Like, I'm not usually like a super emotional guy or anything, but you know, I was like tearing up and stuff after having sleep paralysis because I felt like I was finally back after like seeing her. And again, I felt like I was gone for like 6 months. And I mean, time dilation, I don't know for sure. I mean, if astral traveling is the way that it's presented, that it is another reality, I mean, I definitely see it as a possibility that even if you are an astral version of yourself and you're non-physical, maybe it's possible that like these consciousness between the same person and other realities have this ability to possibly be able to kind of shuffle sometimes, where it's like maybe the me that was here sleeping could have been the me that was in these other realities, and they were getting just kind of bounced back, and we're all kind of trading consciousness within the same physical vessels. But that's one of those weird experiences I've never quite been able to fully explain. But again, part of the reason why I dive into not just the standard phenomenon, but just bizarre phenomenon as a whole, because it's like that is kind of hard to classify under anything specifically, but it's definitely like a fascinating experience that needs to have a little bit more research and, you know, a little bit more thought put into it. But the most recent experience that I had with this kind of stuff, and it sounds like it starts off as a sad story, but this one actually ended up being a positive experience. But my girlfriend and I were trying to have our second kid at the time, and we had an issue where there wasn't a heartbeat at 8 weeks. Basically, she had to she had a miscarriage is the best way to kind of describe. She had to get a DNC the surgery to kind of like remove it because it wasn't miscarrying properly. But after all of that, of course, very traumatic, like emotional time. And I ended up having an experience again with going into this like astral realm. But this one was the weirdest of all my experiences, but in like a more positive way, where I woke up and I was in this place. I wasn't floating. I wasn't standing. I was just kind of existing within this place. And it was in the middle of space, just all blacked out space. And I was inside of this like purple nebula type thing in the middle of space. And there was this kid that came up to me. He was probably about 6, 7, somewhere in that area. And he says, "That wasn't a good vessel. I'll see you on the next one." And the kid looked like me. And ironically, about a couple weeks later, maybe a month later, I figured out that Gabby was pregnant again. And a couple months after that, you know, I figured out that it's a son. And it was just kind of weird because it felt like an experience where I ended up seeing my son before he was born. And maybe it had something to do with the traumatic experience at the time. But I still try to remember what this kid's face looks like every single day, so that when my kid gets to that age, I can confirm this for myself. And my son is about to be 3 in December. And from as far as I can see so far, like it seems like it lines up that I had this experience where I saw my kid before he was actually born. But I guess I'll have to get back to everybody on that one in a couple years. But I guess I'll let you kind of pop in for a little bit. But that's mainly the highlights with my like astral travel, paranormal type experiences. And I have had a few other ones, not necessarily related fully to this astral travel stuff, but a couple other ones that are all relating to experiences around this specific abandoned building that my girlfriend and I used to explore. But I'll let you hop in before I just continuously talk.
No, you're doing a fantastic job, my friend. And it's interesting because you're talking about a lot about sleep paralysis and dreams. Unless you had that experience, you and I are having a conversation. It's easy for us to relate and have a conversation because we know what we're talking about. But to explain to somebody who's never had that experience and may not be somewhat of a believer, it makes it a little bit difficult. And this is why I mentioned this. Before you got into podcasting, there is a period in between where I'm just going to spitball what I think might have happened, where you're probably trying to find answers to whatever it is that's happening to you. So you might have seen the TV shows, you might have read the books, but eventually, fast forward, you get into podcasting, where you could actually reach out to certain people and try to get the best answers possible, do the best research you can. So in between the teenage years and the podcasting, did you ever get into investigations with a group, or did you eventually graduate towards the podcasting part of this?
I never did like investigations necessarily as a group. I had gone out and done like my own paranormal investigations, and I guess I can kind of bounce into this continuation that partially kind of ties into the last experiences that I was talking about. But before I had started actually podcasting and everything, my girlfriend and I used to do urban exploring, which for everybody that's not familiar with what that is, it's when you check out these old abandoned buildings. Part of it, you know, is paranormal investigating. The other half is kind of just exploring. But we found this place that we really want to start checking out called Northville Psychiatric Hospital in Northville, Michigan. And of course, like most psychiatric hospitals, it has a pretty tumultuous history. And going into this place, we started coming into it, and it's like a full campus. So there's like the main hospital, there's all these different dorms, there's these like different athletic areas and all this kind of stuff. It's like a full on campus. So we start going into this place, and we start getting to a point where we're like mapping this place out. We know where every single thing's at in this place. Well, actually, I guess before we got that far, the first time we'd really gone there, and this was before I knew all the like rules of the paranormal, I guess you could say. Like I was interested in it, but I didn't like follow the rules like that. But the first time we had gone, I ended up finding this little tiki head, and it looked like it was made out of like foam, and it almost looked like somebody like carved it and painted it. And my best guess was that it was maybe something that was made by one of the patients there, because, you know, psychiatric hospital, they still do arts and crafts and stuff, but you're not going to give them a piece of wood to whittle. You know, you give them piece of styrofoam with a butter knife or something, and they can kind of whittle it down and do arts and crafts and stuff. But that's what it looked like, because it was made out of foam. But I thought it was interesting, so I ended up taking it home. That and a no smoking sign that I thought was pretty interesting. And that night, my girlfriend and I get home, and best way to describe the setup of the front room is that you walk in the front door, and there's stairs that go upstairs, and then there's the front room, and then there's the kitchen behind it, but there's doorways on either side, so it's almost like a continuous loop. So we drop our backpacks and everything off upstairs, come back downstairs, and we're about to go get a snack. I'm standing at the base of the stairs by the door, and she goes to take off into the kitchen. As she goes to do that, we both make direct eye contact with this dark figure sitting on the couch. The typical shadow person kind of makeup, where it's pitch black in the room, but this shadow is darker than dark. It's like you can't see through this thing. There's nothing passable, and it's in the shape of a human sitting there. And she does that weird thing where, like, when you're in that certain set of fear, seeing something, you kind of just autopilot, where she stares at this thing and walks right past it as she walks right in front of it. And then she loops around into the kitchen and around to the other side. And then she looks at me and goes, "You saw that, right?" And we both looked over there, and it wasn't there anymore. So later on that night, she ends up going to bed. I've always been somewhat of a night owl, so I watch TV and stuff like that for a while. So I'm sitting and watching TV that night, and she's sleeping. And next thing I know, I hear down the hallway this boom, 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 and it sounds like somebody gets pushed down the stairs. And as I hear that boom, she springs up, and she goes, "Whoa, I just had this dream that I just got pushed down the stairs." And I was like, "Dude, that's weird, because I just heard something get pushed down the stairs." And up until this point, I'd never explained to her like my background of all this like weird stuff that's happened to me, because that's one of those things you kind of keep to yourself until you have that moment where you can be like, okay, like this is the type of stuff I've dealt with before. So I ended up explaining to her like all of my like sleep paralysis experiences and all my astral traveling experiences. And after that was like the one time that she'd ever experienced that. So I've been kind of curious if it's possible that if somebody is an astral traveler, that maybe they can kind of pass it on to people around them unintentionally. But so that was like her first experience with kind of coming into this stuff. So after that, I ended up, next time we went, I put all that stuff back. I didn't want to have it in the house, of course, because we saw that dark figure, something pushed it on the stairs. Like you kind of get the hint. And after that was when I kind of started taking this stuff a lot more seriously, actually doing these investigations at this place. So, you know, going back and stuff, we got the typical photos of like orbs and everything, but it was an old building, so you can always chalk it up to dust. I've always been more on the skeptical side, because I feel like that's a good way to research, because if everything's a ghost, then everything's going to be a ghost. But you got to rule out every rational part of thought. And then after that, if it's unexplainable, then you can start getting into that realm and you actually know that you have something. But if every bump is a ghost, then you're not really doing anything for the research. But going back to this place more frequently, we got again to the point, like I was mentioning earlier, that we had this place like fully mapped out. We knew everything about this building, knew where all the entrances were, all the exits, all of that. And we had this one experience that it may link into this main experience, but I'm not 100% sure, which is why I always kind of tell it with this. And there was one day that we were up, I think where it was like the third floor. We weren't too high up in the building, but we're a couple stories up. And we're looking out of the back window, and it was me, my girlfriend, and one of her friends. And I'm looking into the back like wood line that's behind this place, and I see a cougar walk out, and it looks up at us, makes like direct eye contact, and then it creeps back into the woods. And for everybody that isn't too familiar with like animals that are native to, you know, southern Michigan, Cougars are definitely not one of those animals. That is not something that you see in Michigan. And I thought it was particularly weird that we're up in this building and it somehow looked up and like stared at us when it's not like we were making a bunch of noise, like nothing. It just like knew that we were there. And again, just kind of slinked back into the woods. So trying to leave that night, that was usually the way that we kind of took out, was through those woods. So we ended up having to go like all the way around the block and everything, because we don't want to take any chances with this cougar. And a couple of years later, looking into it, there was other people who had seen this cougar in Northville, but like a body was never recovered. Nobody ever found it. It was just seen in Northville a few times. And I didn't want to believe that I had seen a cougar, because that doesn't make any sense for this area. But after seeing that article, it kind of brought some validity to what I thought I had seen. And going into like the main big experience that happened at this place, we got to the point where we had everything mapped out. We knew all the buildings and everything, but the one place we hadn't checked out is the Northville tunnels, which connect underneath this hospital, and it goes all through Northville, which is the reason why we hadn't actually gone down there, was because we didn't want to run the risk of, our flashlights running out of batteries, anything like that, and then having to feel back on the walls for potentially miles, depending on how far out you go into this place. So we just said we were going to go into it a little bit and just kind of check it out for the sake of doing it. And at this hospital, you go down into the basement, and there's like cutouts that lead into these tunnels and stuff. So we go into the basement, and I come down the main staircase into the basement, and there's this brick wall to the right side. And it had this, not even necessarily a doorway, but it had bricks removed that kind of made like an opening in this wall. It wasn't like somebody knocked it over. It looked like at some point they professionally like removed these blocks. And so I go down, I go to look into that room. And when I turn to look into that room, it's pitch black. There's this like cart that's sitting on the other side. And I end up hearing a disembodied voice in my right ear that says, "Run." And as I hear that, behind that hospital cart, there's this thing that stands up. And it's this tall, lanky, decrepit, decaying looking humanoid type thing. Like just tall, lanky, like bluish gray colored skin, like decrepit looking. And I had this long, black, greasy hair on the top of its head. Wasn't a human, wasn't a crackhead, wasn't some homeless person down there. Like this thing was not shaped like a normal person. It was tall, lanky, and the flesh color is just not a color that you see in human skin unless the human is already dead. So after that, I just said run to my girlfriend and her friend, and we took up off the stairs. They followed me. I didn't tell them what I had seen because I wasn't trying to freak them out too much. My main concern was just trying to get out of this building. But as we're running out, my girlfriend's a photographer, so she's taking pictures and stuff behind us. And I'll actually send you the picture after the show. But this thing that I had seen was physical. But in the picture that we captured of this thing, it looked more like an apparition, but it was definitely the shape and the thing that I had seen. So I kind of put this in the back burner of my mind for a while and didn't really know where to put it, who to tell about this. Like, even after I started my show, I didn't end up actually talking about this experience until a couple months in, because I didn't really know where to place it, because I started looking stuff up and I kept kind of coming back towards Wendigo. But at the time, like I wasn't too familiar with Native American folklore as far as the Wendigo goes. Native American folklore, yes, because I grew up with my grandma telling me stories, but not the Wendigo specifically. But most people see the Wendigo and they think of this like deer-headed skeleton antler type being, but that was never what the natives had actually described. They described this like decaying zombie-like creature that would like eat its lips off and everything. And how the natives described it was basically what I had seen in this basement. So I started putting some other pieces together with some other people on shows talking about the whole concept with Wendigos, that you're not safe from the first snowfall to the last snowfall. And there's all these legends and stories about during the summer, they go underground, they stay in these places that are cold, and the tunnels were a good like 20 degrees cooler than anywhere upstairs and everything like that. So kind of starting to put pieces together. Like my best guess, and I don't know for sure, I'm just again trying to guess here, is that I potentially may have seen like a Wendigo. And I've had people throw the idea at me about rakes or pale crawlers, but my kind of theory on that is that kind of diving into Wendigos, and I ended up doing a 3-part series on it for my other show, Bizarre Encounters. But it seems like the whole antler skeleton type thing didn't start coming along until like the white settlers started coming across the country and retelling all of their stories. And just like a lot of the Native American stuff, they put all of these like demonic undertones on stuff. Like they'll take this sacred area and they'll call it like the devil's tea kettle or the devil's this or the devil's that. So it seemed like it was more of a trying to demonize their culture and their stories and stuff like that and make them fit into like the white perspective of like, this is something demonic, this is something good. So they put that indentation of like the antler skeleton Baphomet evil demonic looking thing onto it. But I think that as things kind of transition through time, we separated a Wendigo from what it actually is. And that's why you don't hear about all these like Wendigo sightings and stuff like that all the time, but you hear about pale crawlers and rakes, which is what I think we've done, is that we've reclassified the Wendigo into these new names because we've lost track of what the original Wendigo is. And after kind of piecing all this stuff together, and again, this is kind of when I started moving a little bit more into my podcast. That was kind of like the best like guess that I could possibly come up with. But the reason that why I'd kind of jumped in and actually had started the podcast and stuff is because I was investigating this place. I had these like weird experiences. I started taking the paranormal stuff a little bit more seriously because of these experiences. Because growing up and just having all these weird experiences, you kind of get to a point where you're like, whatever you're going to do, come at me. It is what it is, kind of. And then once you start getting a little bit older, you have like a girlfriend and stuff you care about, you have less of that mentality of like, come get me, bro. You know, you want to take this stuff seriously and try to do the preventative protection things that you can do, which is where I've kind of transitioned now. Is after having these weird experiences, I wanted to have more people to talk about this stuff with and have people share their experiences and be able to talk to researchers and stuff like that to try to kind of piece this stuff together. And it kind of started off originally with me kind of diving into my experiences without me actually necessarily talking about them on the show, but kind of dancing around them. But I eventually ended up sharing them and stuff like that on the show. And like I am now going on to shows and talking about them and stuff. But it kind of took this weird transition where I had my own experiences. I was trying to start kind of figuring stuff out. It turned into the podcast as a means of being able to kind of figure stuff out. And now I've gotten to a point where I've kind of like moved past my experiences and I've moved into investigating, quote, the phenomenon as a whole, because I don't necessarily stick to cryptids, ghosts, strange phenomenon, UFO stuff. I kind of cover, like I mentioned earlier, like everything weird as a whole, just trying to understand, quote, like the phenomenon as a whole based off of my own weird experiences. And after starting the podcast is when I started getting into doing more investigations. So from there, I ended up joining Phantoms and Monsters, part of the 40 research team and stuff. So I get some reports and stuff like that through that. But anything that I can go out and investigate, usually do. Sasquatch stuff, a lot of the times, paranormal stuff. But, you know, I kind of take whatever I can get. And if it's in a reasonable means to be able to drive to, then, man, I take those encounter reports and, you know, I try to investigate them the best I can. And if I can't, then I'll try to connect through channels or talk to the person about other people who've had similar experiences and at least try to get them to a point where they feel like they're not crazy for having these experiences.
I'm glad you brought everything what you just did, because as you're talking, it's almost we're having a similar journey, to say the least. Going into the podcast part, how many shows are you involved with right now?
So my main one that I started off with was Inquiries of Our Reality. After that, I did a little sideshow for a little bit that was Big Dumb Inquiries, but that one stopped going on after Kyle from Big Dumb Podcast ended up leaving. So after that, Bizarre Encounters. So right now I have Inquiries of Our Reality, Bizarre Encounters. Orrin and I also do a side short show that's called Bizarre Inquiries. And I'm also in the process of starting up a new show, which is going to be Encounter Reports. And I'm going to call that one the Reality Report. So 2 main shows and I guess 2 side shows. So 4 shows altogether.
Man, you know, that's what I was saying. I was definitely underselling the amount of work you're putting into this. And the reason I asked about how many shows you have and the time between having these experiences and then the podcast, have you been able to put together through the experiences of your different guests? And I think you kind of already answered that question. Like with me, because I feel every guest story is very important, and I might be able to learn certain facts about what is going on in my own life. Have you been able to at least get some answers as to why this is happening to you?
Not necessarily happening to me, but just why people have had these experiences in general. Because even like the astral travel stuff, trying to figure out more about it. Like I've had these experiences where I've tried to do like where you're aware that you're dreaming. There's a name for that. I'm brain farting on it right now. You're just basically becoming aware that you're asleep within a dream. So I started doing this like I know everybody has like the little tips and tricks for this, but the one that seemed to work the best for me was that I would turn on a night light that was within my view in a dark room, and I'd have my eyes closed, but I could still see the light through. And I kind of described it as like leaving a light on the back of the house so that not everything's fully shut down. And whenever I would do that, I would become aware when I was in these dreams. And it never went my way where I was able to actually control or do anything in these realms, because it would go into like super mode when I would try to do this. Like one experience I had was I was at this house, I was just hanging out, and the next thing I know, my girlfriend's sister comes in and she like kisses me and says something, and I'm like, what's going on here? So then my girlfriend walks in and she's with her sister's boyfriend, and I'm like, all right, this is weird. This doesn't seem right. So I go into the bathroom and I start looking at my hands, and I'm like, all right, I'm pretty sure I'm in the astral realm right now. So I'm like, I'm going to control this. So as soon as I start trying to control it, all the walls drop out and I start blasting through space at this like super fast rate. And I quickly realized that that's probably my biggest fear for whatever reason. And it seemed like every single time I would try to become self-aware in these dreams, that would be what would happen. And I tried this so many times that it got to a point where I almost have like PTSD from this stuff, where I would like, the VR helmets that were pretty popular for a while, like the Oculus VR helmets.
Yeah.
So there was this one app I had on mine where it was like a solar system map, and you could like go to each individual planet. But if you clicked on a planet, you'd fly through space to that other planet. And every single time I tried to use this thing, I'd have like a heart attack and like panic. So I got to a point where I like gave up trying to control these dreams, because every single time I would do it, would just turn out worse for me than if I just leave it alone.
So when you make this, I'm going to call it a quantum leap of sorts. Is this happening randomly? Because I would hate for this to happen while you're driving or something like that. Does this happen when you go into bed, chilling on the couch, or what?
It would happen when I would go to sleep at night randomly. Like I had no control over this, when it was ever going to happen, but it wouldn't be like it would happen randomly in the middle of the day if I was like awake. It would just be when I would go to sleep, this would randomly happen. So if like I took a nap in the middle of the day, it might happen. Anytime I go to sleep, it might happen, but it wouldn't just like randomly happen if I was driving or doing something like that. No.
Well, that's good, because that's one of the biggest fear I would have, is because those kind of things you can't really control. It just happens, but thankfully happens when you're ready to go to sleep, and I think your mind is more open to this type of thing happening to you. With the shows and the great guests that you've had on, have you also had people contact you or call you to be on the show to share their experiences, or you usually interview people who are in the field, so to say?
Honestly, I kind of do both. The way I kind of see inquiries is that it's kind of like the soapbox for anybody that has an experience, has some research that they want to share. I call it like an open-minded conversation style show. So it's like, I'll have people come on and just share paranormal experience that they've dealt with. And I'll have researchers that'll come on and they'll share, their heavy in-depth research that they do. But doing it that way, I feel like it brings this broader perspective to all of it. Because if you just have everybody on that's a researcher, then you're not getting that person that's been in that first person experience actually talking about it. So it's like, I feel like you kind of need that range. Like you can't block anybody off because they're not a big guest, because they're this, because everybody at the end of the day has an experience or a story to tell. And it's just a matter of giving them a comfortable place to try to be able to do that. And that's what I've tried to do with inquiries, because all my shows have totally different ways that they run. They're all totally different show styles, but at least for inquiries, it's like this trying to figure out what reality essentially through all of these different people's perspectives. And that's kind of how I've always envisioned that show, is that the only way we're going to get answers is to be able to get everybody's perspective. So, I don't block anybody off. It can be somebody who's never been on a podcast in their entire life, and they can come on and just have this laid back conversation with me. And then we can, get their experiences out if they want to talk about them and stuff. But what I try to do with the show though, is I try not to turn people's experiences into strictly just entertainment. Because the way that I kind of view the show is that people come on, they talk about these traumatic experiences. And the reason that we're doing it is that, one, to not make other people feel like they're crazy for having similar experiences, and to hopefully be able to either, one, connect them with somebody who can help them, or two, maybe make some connections for them. But if you just kind of have people come on and you're just like, wow, that's a crazy experience, thank you, bye, then I don't feel like you're really doing like the research just. It's like, podcasts are definitely entertainment for people, but on the other side of it, at least this type of stuff, it's like you have to take it seriously as research. Understand people take it as entertainment, but like as the guest, you just have to make sure that you're not just like exploiting somebody's experience. You have to have the right mindset going into it and actually have the intention of helping this person. Cause like I've had a few shows that I've never ended up airing where I've had people come on and talk about growing up in cult families, and they get very emotional talking about it. And they, at the end, say, I don't want this to get out, but like, thank you for sitting down and talking to me about this and walking through this experience. And it's like stuff like that at the end of the day, even though I never get to release that episode, it's like, it doesn't matter because I got to be that listening ear for that person. And I got to give them the means to not feel like they're crazy and have somebody to talk to. So at the end of the day, like, it's worth it. And the podcast is just almost like an extra means of being able to have this access to be able to have this communication with people. It's not just about the podcast. It's like the podcast is the means to being able to do the research, if that makes sense.
100% does make sense, because for me, I'll interview not only just researchers or authors, people who have the authentic experience themselves as well, because every story is important, as you and I both agree on that. And I launched a second show because I also do entertaining things as well, to put that entertainment factor into that second show. But I want to focus like one show strictly on people's experiences or what they've researched and reported. So when the individuals contact you, because you mentioned in a pre-interview, we talked about, is there a phone line now that you have? Are they emailing you? How is it happening?
So originally I was using the email, which is ommencounterreports@outlook.com. But a couple days ago, I finally, well, this will be a little bit delayed after when I set this up, but I recently set up a hotline for people to be able to call in and share their experiences and reports. And that phone number for anybody that might be interested is 313-364-1551. I could probably give it to you to throw into the show description or whatever. And if anybody wants to come and check it out on my social media, there's also a means of doing it there. But the intention with that is that the reality report, the other show that I had mentioned that I'm going to be starting up, I wanted to use that as a means of being able to have people share their experiences. And if they call in on this voicemail, then I can take those recordings and use them directly on the show and everything. But with this, of course, it says it in the voicemail when you call, but I would definitely want people to leave a means of contact for me to get a hold of them. I wouldn't want to put anything on the show that people wouldn't want to be okay with, because the other side of this line is that, one, I want to be able to use it to put on the show so that people can get their experiences out. But on the other side too, it's also an open line for anybody that possibly needs to have something investigated if they don't want it to be on anything. So that's totally okay too. Just whoever calls in, just let me know what your intention is behind it. And either one, if you don't want it to be on the show whatsoever, you just need somebody to check this out, investigate it. If you're within an area that I can get to, I'm more than happy to come out and investigate it for you. We can keep it completely between us. But if I'm not able to, you're on the other side of the country from me, then I do have a network of a bunch of other investigators and researchers and everything that I talk to. So I can still be able to hook you up with somebody that might be on your side of the country. But it all starts with this hotline. So I'm going to make sure I say that number again. So if anybody has anything they want to report to have out in the ether for other people to know about, or they need something investigated, you can either email me at ommencounterreports@outlook.com, or you guys can call or text 313-364-1551.
That's pretty excellent, because mostly people contact each other through email or they message each other. That's a very personal thing now with a hotline. So it's a beautiful thing that you're doing, a beautiful service. And I want to touch on something you said earlier, a little while ago, talking about things that are unusual to Michigan. You're talking about bobcats and a wendigo, maybe a rakes. I know Bigfoot's pretty big in Michigan, Dogman, but what are some of the ones that we don't know about? Because I think every state has their one, super cryptid that, like here in West Virginia, if it's not Bigfoot, it's Mothman. If you go down to Florida, it's the skunk ape or something like that. The names are endless, what you call these creatures. So what's going on in Michigan?
Honestly, we have a couple different weird hotspots. Of course, we have like the Manistee, which is where all like the Dogman stuff happens. Usually northern Michigan and the UP is where a lot of like the squatching type stuff happens. But also in Michigan, we also have the city that is the third on the list of the most UFO abductions per capita. And actually that is one of the corners of where the Lake Michigan Triangle is, which also goes over to Chicago, which is where a lot of the Mothman sightings and stuff like that are. So, I mean, there's definitely strange phenomenon where ships and planes and stuff go missing in that area, but there's also the other side of like this weird portal-like activity, I guess you could say, of these like weird beings being seen around this area. Kind of diving into some other areas of Michigan. One of the main ones for Detroit is the Nine Rouge, which is this like imp that was talked about since like the beginning of Detroit. And the whole idea behind this thing is that whenever you see it, it's like a bad omen. And whenever this thing's been seen, like there was like when Detroit burned down multiple times, the same thing was seen right before that. When Cadillac, the founder of Detroit, was going to die, he ended up seeing this thing right before. And a lot of people have had theories on it about it being possibly some type of like elemental or some kind of like wood being that was here. And once the city became established, he was essentially pissed off that it happened in his area where this was his area. And I mean, there's still some random sightings here and there. Detroit, which is the type of people that live there, not bad in that way, but there's a lot of people that are addicts in Detroit. That's like the main thing now. People have this whole thing about like, you know, gangsters and stuff being in Detroit. That's not really the case anymore. It's mainly people that are like drug addicts and stuff. So it's like when people have these sightings and stuff in Detroit, you kind of have to weed out what type of person they are, because it definitely could have been somebody that was high on something at the time when they'd seen this thing. But that's one of the main ones as far as Detroit goes. Detroit seems to have a lot of this like occult symbolism based around it. A lot of people don't realize it, but we have this place called the Masonic Temple, which is a pretty big like concert venue in Michigan. And that was actually started by Crowley, like the Crowley back in the day. So we have a Masonic Temple that was originally started by Crowley. And within Detroit, we have all these like weird ley lines and stuff. And we have these like murals. We have this one specific one that a lot of people think it's supposed to be like a portal, but they say it's supposed to like represent the struggle of Detroit. But it's like there's this block that's in it that looks like a bunch of souls like stuck in a block. So there's a lot of these like weird occult type statues that are like all around Detroit and stuff like that. But kind of diving back into a little bit more of the monster stuff, you know, most places, we definitely have our lake monster. And then we also have this other thing that's supposedly seen in Lake Superior, which is like over on the other side of the UP. And it's this like this water panther, and it's supposed to be like the protector of, I believe, copper in the area, if I'm not mistaken. And it begins with an M. I'm totally brain farting on the name. It's a Native American name, so I don't want to say it not correctly. But there was this I guess you could say, like, I don't want to say cave drawing, but there's this drawing on the stone of this thing that's up in the UP that's like right on the lake and everything like that. So that's kind of where like a lot of the base came from for it. And a lot of like Native American stories and stuff like that based around that. But Michigan has kind of this like weird, vast, we have pockets of like different things in different areas. So it's like we have a lot of different like paranormal type stuff throughout Michigan, just like most states and stuff. But I guess those are kind of like our main ones as far as Michigan goes, is that, you know, the lake monster, I don't feel like a lot of people really put too much thought into that as far as like how other states go with their lake monsters. It seems like the main focus for Michigan is like the Squatch stuff in northern Michigan, the UFO stuff that's on the west side of Michigan towards the north, and the Dogman stuff, which takes over just about the whole Manistee, which is this forest that almost takes up like the entire west side of the state.
Yeah, and I agree with you, because a lot of the sites for lake monsters are such that's hard to investigate, because you can't just go dive in the water or get in a boat and look for something like that. First of all, it's rather dangerous. It's already dangerous enough to go into the woods, but later go into a lake or a river, you know, you're kind of taking your chances. And it's hard to track.
Brought that up actually, because there's another thing I forgot to throw in. Michigan also has this like Stonehenge that's off in the water that's over in Lake Michigan too. And same thing that you just said. It's like so much water. The problem is people can't get down to actually do too much research into this thing, even though they know that it's there. So it's like, you know, we have all these shipwreck legends all over the lakes, especially in Superior, because it's deep enough and it's cold enough that bodies don't come back up. So it's like you have all of this ghost lore, ghost ship lore, shipwreck lore all around Michigan. But it's like, it's fascinating, but it's hard to investigate, because what are you going to do? Just aimlessly boat around in the water looking for a ghost ship? Like,
No, you get a wetsuit, go down there. You might never make it back up, though. That's the problem.
exactly.
Going into back to your show. Like I said, I listened to it at work. It's one of my favorite shows out there, by the way. You have incredible guests. I was telling you how jealous I was if you had L.A. Marzulli on that. Great interview, by the way. That guy is full of he's been doing this for so many decades, man. You barely scratch the surface of what that man knows.
No, he's definitely fascinating, though.
Yeah.
And just to tie in too, Vicky Joy Anderson, the one I mentioned in the beginning, she also works with him. So she's like an extension of the whole L.A. Marzulli group, her and Karen Wilkinson. So it's like, they're all fantastic with the research. They're all on a whole other level as far as the way they do the research.
Yeah, absolutely, my friend. With Go back to the podcast, you interview a lot of people just like I have. And every once in a while there's a story that sticks with me. Some are funny stories, some are great stories, some of them are absolutely wretched and sad. You don't have to mention any names or anything like that, but have you had a story or two that just stick to you to this day that you just like, I can't believe I heard this?
I've had a few of them actually with people growing up in, again, occult families. A few people that have had MK Ultra experiences. As far as like more recently, though, one of the ones that have kind of stuck out is there's one I had with this listener who's been a long time listener. His name's Shayn, and ironically also named Shayn. And he had this experience where he was basically like like messing with this like dark being that was in his house, and it got so serious to the point where like there was this point where this thing like ripped his consciousness out of his body and like threw him on the floor, like his astral version of himself. And he said it was like the most horrifying thing he'd ever experienced, and this thing would like leave physical marks and everything on him. So it's like that one is probably one of those experiences that has stuck with me more than a lot of the stuff that's been on the show. And actually, at the time we're talking about this episode hasn't aired yet, but by the time this comes out, it will have aired. I recently had on this guy named Wes Coons, and he was talking about his experiences with this house. And he was like he didn't believe in the paranormal, didn't do any of that kind of stuff. And living in this house, he ended up kind of doing this complete 360 now, where he like goes and he helps people out. He like heals people and stuff like that now. But in like the middle of this like experience, there was one time when he basically said that he was seeing this like almost like a portal opening or something in his house. It was just like this mist that was like existing within his like security cameras and stuff. But when he would look past it, he could see like the neighbor's yard. It was just like existing within his house. And there was this one point where he was in his bedroom, he was sitting with his dog, and his like door started shaking. So he ended up like kicking this door open with his gun and stuff like that. And within like this experiences in this house, he ended up seeing this like demonic looking figure. It was violently like attacking him and stuff like that. And he got to the point where he was like this ex-Marine guy, like tough, badass guy. And he was scared to go in this house to the point where like when he needed to shower, he would put like boards down so that none of the doors could close to make a path so he could go and shower and get out of this house. Cause he spent a few months living in his RV in his driveway because he was scared to be inside this house, because every time he go in his house, this thing would mess with his head and basically make him go to his gun and like hold his gun and like contemplate like wanting to like hurt himself. And that wasn't him or how he thought. Like as soon as he would leave this house, he would not feel like that. It was when he would walk into this house, he'd have this pull. And he was talking about this day that his assistant was there and said that he was like doing this weird thing where he would like walk up, put his gun down, and he would like fight and come back. And then he would like loop back and do the same thing. And he doesn't remember most of this happening. He just remembers like the part where he was like there putting the gun down, but he was getting into this loop, and he wasn't even aware that he was in a loop, other than the fact that his like assistant saw him do this. And just those stories, man, where people start off as like non-believers in any of this kind of stuff. And when they're telling their experiences, they start like tearing up. You just see these like emotional responses, and you can see like how traumatic these experiences are for them. And those ones always stick with me, not because of like, you know, how crazy the story is, but just like how traumatizing it was to these people to actually go through these experiences. And being able to do those episodes where people are comfortable enough to open up about this. I can give them my theories, my ideas on things that have been happening to them and stuff. That kind of stuff, just like, it means the world to me. It reminds me of like why I started the show and do this kind of stuff in the first place. Cause it's like, again, these experiences are extremely traumatic for people. And when you actually see somebody tearing up while they're telling these experiences, like it just brings this like super real world connection to it. And usually by the end of those episodes, it's like, you know, the people will usually like thank you for giving them the opportunity to open up and be able to talk about this kind of stuff. And, you know, it's just, I'm glad that I've been able to create that space that people feel comfortable enough to talk about this stuff in and leave their experiences with me and get them out into the ether so that other people are aware of them, know about them, and they don't seem like they're so crazy having these experiences and stuff. But kind of long way coming around. It's just those experiences are always the ones that stick with me the most.
Yeah, you know, as you're towards once you finish saying what you were saying, the first thing that came to mind was an interview I did with a gentleman out of the UK. I believe it was earlier this year. About he was an experiencer. He's been abducted multiple times, especially since he was a very young person. And the way he was telling me the story, and you could tell by the body language, man, it was just, I almost felt guilty asking him the kind of questions.
That's how I
And
felt with a few
yeah,
different people. I had one guy on that he grew up in an occult family, and it got to the point where like they had him involved in these like secret missions where he was working for the government, and he would basically do these things that he would call silent killing, which is like you'd go completely ape shit and just destroy somebody, sometimes even making it look like an animal did it, but then you'd get up and walk away and have no like emotional tie to this. And just all of the trauma that they put him through growing up, it wasn't just like one day he was able to do this. Like they spent his entire life making it so he was so emotionally disconnected from people that he would have the ability to completely disintegrate and destroy somebody and not feel anything about it. Like that kind of stuff, man, like that kind of stuff sticks with you. It's just a whole other level of just bringing validity to like these situations, and the lifelong trauma of people that grew up in occult families and these child trafficking things. Like it's so hard to hear, but at the same time though, it's like if people aren't aware of this stuff, like it's one of those things that's in the back of everybody's mind that they know that there's these trafficking organizations going on. They know that there's all these like occult practices and like weird rituals and stuff going on, but it's like people tend to try to side skate around that. So sometimes it's like you need those people that are willing to talk about this after going through this awful thing to bring it into the forefront so that people are re-aware of the fact that like not everybody is who they say they are. All of these families that have all this power, all this wealth, all of this stuff, it's not through money that they have this wealth. They collect this wealth through having favors and having blackmail for other people. And the more that you dive into talking about people who have had these experiences, like you think of the occult and all that kind of stuff, and there's two sides of it. That either one, there's the occult side that these people completely believe and are fully in depth in this type of stuff, and they believe that they're doing these rituals. And then on the other side of it, it's like, it also seems like it's like a mass understanding of psychology where basically they just completely learn how to break down people and manipulate them and make them think that they're in this world that isn't necessarily the world that they're in. And that's kind of been like the hard block talking to people with these experiences is, do these people that are conducting this stuff actually believe what they're doing? Or are they doing it for the process of understanding psychology and being able to break somebody down? And depending on who you talk to, it's like you get both sides of it. There's some people that have been through these experiences and they completely 100% think that it's all just a mass understanding of how to manipulate somebody. And then on the other side, it's like they completely have seen these crazy things or they've seen voids open up. So it's like, it's a two-sided phenomenon. I think that there's the side that is 100% into the rituals, into the occult and conducting these things. And on the other side, there's people that are taking the practices and using them for being able to manipulate others.
you know, in the minute you start delving into the world of satanic ritual abuse, and not even has to be even a cult. I mean, just recently with, I don't want to say their entertainer's name, but we all know what happened here with these sex parties in Hollywood, Hollywood's been doing this for decades, by the way. This is
That
nothing
dude's just
new.
another Epstein, man. Like everybody's focusing on him, but like not to side tangent on this and some other thing, but like I think Epstein wasn't the guy. He was just one of some guys, and he just got too loud talking. And I think that there's a lot of these blackmailers that are put in these specific spots in order to collect information. I think Hugh Hefner was one of these people. I think he was just a lot better at the way he did it because he had rock stars coming to this mansion, definitely doing stuff with underage girls. I guarantee you there's cameras everywhere. This guy had so much blackmail on people, but he did it the right way where he didn't piss off the wrong channels. And I think that Pete, that not to mention the name, if you didn't want to mention on the show, did the same thing where he was just a pawn in this, where he was collecting blackmail for people that are way higher above. And everybody's like, woohoo, we caught the guy. But it's like, you didn't catch the guy. You caught one of hundreds, thousands that may exist. And it's just a matter of the ones that they either need to, do the sleight of hand thing where you're looking over here while they're doing this thing over here. They'll just give some people up sometimes, or if somebody's too loud, they'll give them up and then they'll, have this thing that'll happen where they won't be alive anymore before the actual trial happens. And you never get these names, no matter what people kind of come through. You never end up getting these names. They always hint at, we have this list that has these names. Ghislaine Maxwell, same thing, had these lists, had these names. None of it ever gets released. So even with this one, everybody's thinking we're going to get this list of all these politicians, all these celebrities, all this whatever that are involved in this stuff, but you're never going to see that list because they just use him as a ploy so that they could do some other stuff over here while everybody's paying attention to him right now.
We're never going to get to the final boss, to tell you the truth. You know, it's just like when cops bust dealers, you get the low-level dealer, you're never going to get the big guy.
Dude, in Detroit, like a couple of years ago, I've talked about this a few times on the show. There was these people that got busted in a burned out neighborhood. They had 180 something kids in this facility, in this building. 2 guys got busted. I saw 1 news stories about it, not 1 other news story, which tells me there was people connected in with that, because how can you cover up a story with 180 some kids hidden in this burned out neighborhood that they were clearly planning on trafficking up? And it's like these islands exist everywhere, man. Like, digging into even Michigan back in the 70s, there's this place called South Fox Island. It was either, I think, South Fox or North Fox Island, because there's the 2 islands up there. But a bunch of like the big people from GM and stuff like that, they're running this summer camp where it wasn't a summer camp. It was like an Epstein Island, and they would trick people into coming to the summer camp thinking that it was just going to be some fun thing. And they're actually doing this island of all these like GM people and all these important people going to these places. Like, these places exist everywhere, and it's just a matter of people ignore it because they know it's there, but they don't want to know that it's really that close to them. But you do this research, man, and it's like these places are right around the corner from you. So these people are everywhere. Like, catching this one isn't doing anything. You're just focusing on this one so the other ones can kind of get out of the radar for a minute.
Yeah, you mentioned this is not something just here in this country. It's a worldwide organization. And I'm not saying they're all the same organization, because I mean, there's could be thousands of different types doing the same type of, awful things. You know what I'm saying? It's just, we'll never know up until the end of days, right? When everything will hopefully be corrected.
Yeah. I mean, not to get too conspiratorial with all this kind of stuff, but even just like another weird connection into this stuff, man. Like, everybody knows all the disasters and everything that were happening in Haiti, and not to get into the new stuff with all the stuff people from Haiti with Ohio and stuff like that. But obviously everybody knows how much trafficking was happening out of Haiti with all the children there. And ironically, just north of that, there's all these islands that are owned by the elites, and all these kids would just disappear. And some of the times it'd be parents that would be paying to get their kids into the United States. You know, they'll just give them money, they'll put them on these boats, and these boats never make it. They end up getting caught by these islands and stuff. But one of the weird things that I dug into at some point was that when they're in the middle of starting to do all this stuff, so there was this company called Cemex, which was based in the United States, and they had actually found this facility that basically was a staging facility for trafficking that was in one of their old facilities. And they were like, oh, we have no ties to that. We don't have anything. We don't know what you're talking about with that. Like, and they started putting out these public notices, like, we don't condone this stuff. We're doing everything in our power to make sure this type of stuff isn't happening, blah, 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 blah. So this is when it gets weird. So all the disasters happening in Haiti, they started rebuilding and everything. And the company, ironically, that got connected with doing a lot of this cement work is Cemex. And the weird part about that is that right before all of this happened, one of the granddaughters or one of the family members of the Rothschilds ended up actually taking over Cemex and was involved with this type of stuff. So it's like, now you have these people that are going to be rebuilding the framework of Haiti, and they're doing the cement work, which means they could build tunnels everywhere. They could build whatever they want. They could build like a full system underneath this place and be able to move people right out of Haiti with no questions asked. And it's already connected with the Rothschilds. Everybody knows the whole thing with, the Clintons linked with all this stuff. And back in the 90s, they used to go to Haiti all the time. They were connected in with, voodoo type stuff and all this. So it's like, there's all these elite connections to Haiti. And ironically, there's also all these kids that go missing out of Haiti regularly into these islands that are just north that are owned by elites. But it's obvious, it's right in front of you, but nobody wants to follow that trail.
No, the trail is too dangerous, with a lot of these alleged stories and accusations where I'm one to always say, where there's smoke, there's fire. And unfortunately, anytime something like this gets uncovered, there's always some sort of disaster or something happens to detours people's eyes to pay attention somewhere else. And usually that's when it's like, wow, the timing's pretty suspect.
You want to talk about suspect timing? I know you normally do more cryptid type stuff. We're kind of getting into the conspiratorial realm here.
Oh, that's fine, brother.
We're talking about all the stuff that's going on with, the recent rapper that got involved with all this stuff. And ironically, at the same time, you know, talking about that sleight of hand concept, that every time something big like this comes out, there's usually something else that's going on behind the scenes. And everybody knows the whole problem that's been happening in the United States as far as people coming into the country that are criminals in their countries, and they're, you know, assaulting, doing the hard R, all that kind of stuff to, you know, women and stuff like that around these areas that these people are populated in. And obviously there's been this back and forth about, you know, trying to get them out and everything. So ironically, as all the rapper stuff comes up, there was also this sleight of hand that happened where they basically passed something that said that these people are allowed to stay in the country. So that was the sleight of hand on that one. They gave up P. Diddy so that they could do this political move and make it so that nobody's aware of the fact that they just basically approve stuff where criminal newcomers, whatever you want to call them, are able to stay in the country instead of just getting immediately sent back to wherever they came from if they got caught in any kind of criminal act. So sleight of hand, it's always sleight of hand. If there's a big story that's happening, look in the background because there's something else going on that's more serious.
Yeah, just take a look at how quickly they kill some stories and what story they blow up next after that. People, the thing is with the short-term memories, kind of like wrestling. When your tag team partner's your best friend, he turns on you. A few months down the road, you guys make up and forget anything happened. You know, it's kind of something like that where major plot holes get filled with nonsense, and that's how the sleight of hand, as you mentioned, with that, and not related to that, but as we're coming towards the end of the show, for the listeners of Let's Find Out that want to know more about all the shows that you do and your partner, and now with the new hotline, and you'll also be doing events too. How can they find out the information about you, what you're doing, and where you're going to be next, my friend?
So I try to make it all quick and easy because I do so many different shows. I put everything under my, I guess you could say, podcast production company, which is Open Minds Media. So if anybody sees Open Minds Media, that's also me. All my shows are linked in with that. But for the sake of making everything quick and easy, I made a Linktree link for Open Minds Media, which will give you links to all the shows I do. And that link is linktr.ee/open_minds_media. You can also look me up on Instagram, Facebook, under any of my shows. Also available on all the major podcast platforms, which if you're going to look the shows up, it's Inquiries About Reality with Shayn Jones and Bizarre Encounters with Shane and Warren. And just to drop the hotline again, if anybody wants to call in, have something investigated, have their experience shared on the show, any of that kind of stuff, you guys can either call the hotline, which is 313-364-1551, or you guys can email me at ommencounterreports@outlook.com.
If you don't mind, I know that we just, man, that hour flew by like nobody's business.
Covered like 10 different topics in that time too.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. I love that kind of stuff, and I'd love to bring you back next year. And I think that probably from tonight up until probably a few months from now, there's going to be a plethora of things to cover.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I got to get you to come on my side too, because you still got to make an appearance on Inquiries and Bizarre Encounters, of course, too.
Oh, I would be honored, my friend. I appreciate that. And thank you so much for being on the show.
Absolute pleasure, man. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, my friend. This has been another excellent episode of Let's Find Out with Diego. Please check us out on all our social media pages, as well as on YouTube and Rumble. Like, share, and subscribe. Also, Let's Find Out is on KGRA Digital Broadcasting. Catch the show on Saturdays at 2 a.m. For more information, please visit KGRADB.com. That's KGRADB.com. Together, we will get one step closer to finding out. Thank you for taking this journey with me. Until next time, my friends.
Let's find out with Diego. The power of Diego madness. Ooh, yeah. All content for Let's Find Out is property of co-host Diego and is served directly from our servers with no modification, redirects, or rehosting. All celebrity impersonators are paid performers. The impersonated celebrities do not endorse or promote any views or opinions expressed by our guests, co-host Diego, or Let's Find Out. The information shared on Let's Find Out is provided on an as-is basis, with no guarantees of completeness, accuracy, usefulness, or timeliness.